I'd like to call the October 25th meeting of the Finance and Planning Committee to order. Looks like we have a significant quorum here. We have about eight out of our 9 members. One little quick disclaimer statement. Official recordings, videos, or transcriptions of HSV Property Owners Association committee meetings and/or board meetings will be done by authorized personnel only and can be viewed on the HSV Property Owners Association YouTube channel and explorethevillage.com. Any other recording, video, transcription of HSV Property Owners Association committee meetings and/or board meetings is not considered the official record of the meeting. With that said, I think the first item on the agenda was review and approval of minutes from the last meeting. Trying to remember, did they?
October 11th.
October 11th, yeah. Trying to remember what meeting that was. I didn't have any comments about the minutes, but I don't know if anybody else did.
No.
If not, motion to approve the minutes as written.
Motion to approve this minute.
Second?
As written, sorry.
Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? No. So next item on the agenda was this week's agenda. Wanted to go ahead and start by taking care of hopefully the last red lines to the emergency reserve policy document. At that point, it'll be forwarded to the board for their consideration. Had a little bit of a walk-in based on a conversation with John Paul last week. Apparently there have been some conversations between the village and a enterprise fleet management regarding a potential program that would save the village money and get us a better refresh cycle on some of our fleet. So it'll be very interesting to understand what we have there. Also like to talk a little bit amongst ourselves about committee performance. Basically, how did we do relative to the budget process? Got some comments from folks on the committee. Would certainly like to get some feedback from the POA viewpoint and from the board viewpoint. Then the last item on the agenda for the moment is a discussion of possible charter adjustments. And then the future tasking item that was on the agenda kind of got pushed off for the fleet management discussion. So does anybody have anything else to put on the agenda today?
No.
My only comment is Dallas is here. If we took him first, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Keep Dallas from sitting around listening to us talk.
Listening to us.
Okay, great. Cool. So Dallas, you're up first, sir. We've got the couple of slides that I guess the enterprise folks gave you.
Yes.
So
yes.
would you mind kind of taking us through how that conversation went?
Well, the reason I first decided to go about trying to find a way to do this is with the economy and the market now, we're having a hard time finding vehicles for one, and our fleet is very aged. So that's my 2 main goals, was trying to find vehicles and to kind of get a quicker turnaround on our vehicles so they get to our 7 to 10 year mark that we really need to try to get to keep our vehicles in a good operating order. Mm-hmm. So they presented us with a very nice presentation, and as you can see from some of the printouts that you have, it's going to be I believe a 10-year turnaround on all of our vehicles. Now, it's not all the vehicles, it's 1 tons and under. So it's going to be our dump trucks and sanitation trucks and all that are not going to be included into this. And they're going to be on basically a 3-year turnaround. That way our wholesale to sell the vehicles are going to still be at a high value. Let's see, the first year they recommended 36 vehicles. Now they said that we can kind of mix and match and do different cycles on different vehicles for our different applications. But this is just what they came up with. Now, they didn't have all of our information, so this is still just a rough end of it. But other than that, we do have like I believe that they called it a no appropriations clause, where if we do order the vehicles and we decide we don't want them, they still have plenty of customers out there that will take the vehicles and we're not liable for them. Now, they are on, it is a more or less a lease program, and we can put, the one stipulation I had with that was we don't want that overhead on us. We don't want to have all of our vehicles invested in a lease program, which when we want to pull out of this, it's going to have us to pay out a significant chunk to keep these vehicles. So they did say that we could pay up to 90% down on these vehicles and only have a small amount left on the lease. But in order for them to take care of all the tax tags and licensing on it, it will have to be some type of lease program. They do have the governmental contract, which we have the Arkansas State Procurement Contract, which we order vehicles from, which gets us vehicles at a cheaper rate. They do have a governmental contract that they're looking into if we qualify for it. If we do, we will still get the vehicles around the same price that we're getting with the state procurement contract. See, now, if we do the 3-year turnaround, that does make it to where all these vehicles will still be under the factory warranty on them. So that takes pretty much maintenance cost out of the picture. All we have to do is tires and preventative maintenance like oil changes and stuff like that.
So can I ask a question with
Yeah.
regards to that specific point?
Mm-hmm.
So does the lease require us to do something more above and beyond in order to remain within the contract of the lease with regards to regular maintenance, oil change, et cetera, or?
No, it's just it's manufacturer's guidelines on the preventative maintenance.
Okay.
And we can do it in our shop. We don't have to take it to a certain dealer or a certain shop or anything like that.
Okay. And then are there any stipulations with regards to condition of the vehicle? You know,
Well, what Enterprise does is they lease us the vehicles after the 2, 3, 4 years, however we want to do it. After our lease runs out, they will wholesale the vehicles, and we get the profits from that. So it's all wholesale dealers. If we have dents in the truck, that's going to bring the value down when they sell it to their wholesalers. So it's kind of up to us on how the vehicle's condition is when we go to sell it.
So does the lease, I'm sorry. go
No,
ahead.
please.
So does the lease list a minimum value of the turn-in vehicle? Does the lease call for a minimum value at turn-in? Now, you said they would be the turn-in vehicle will be wholesaled by Enterprise. Is there a minimum dollar amount that vehicle is worth called out in the lease?
I'm not sure on that one. I can check on that.
They stated that they will be looking at Black Book for the values, and so it'll be whatever the market conditions are on the wholesale pricing issued by Black Book for that vehicle with those many miles at that time.
Okay.
They also stated that there is not a clause or a condition to the wear and tear and the condition of the vehicle. It will be passed through though when you're trying to sell it, and that's what he was trying to get at is it'll still be however the buyers, whatever they're willing to pay for it, but they themselves will not penalize us for it, any damage like that.
And I'm assuming mileage is a similar situation? So we don't have any kind of a mileage cap on them or
Correct,
anything
there's
like
not.
that? Okay.
Speaking of mileage, do we have the history of the mileage on our vehicles? You mentioned 3 years, we'd still be under manufacturer warranty, but is that true? Do we put less than warranty miles
All
on the vehicles?
except for like our police vehicles and, mainly the police vehicles. Those are the ones that really rack up the miles on them. Any other ones, they usually stay under our 10,000, 12,000 a year mark.
And what percentage of this is police vehicles?
There is, I believe, 7 vehicles in police.
7 out of the 78,
Yeah.
okay? Do we, just related, but it's applicable potentially here, do we have a policy with regards to if our employees damage the vehicle, consequences to that?
That's a difficult question to answer.
But it's important to
It
how
is.
the wholesale of all this works out, right? So if there's no
Yes.
consequence to them damaging a vehicle, we would be on the losing end of wholesaling at the end of the lease.
We've heard the word accountability thrown around a lot here.
Most organizations have some level of accountability associated with equipment.
That is one of the concerns with this,
Yeah.
is that they will need to be held, and actually held to a higher standard, so that we do not back ourselves into a situation. There are policies out there within HR, but that being said, we do need to make sure we are taking care of our equipment as it should be.
Yeah.
Do we self-insure?
Not on our auto policy. That is one of the other things that we would need to consider if we consider doing this route, is currently our insurance coverage on our automobiles is full coverage for the first 5 years, and we carry only liability after the 5 years. If we make this transition, all of our regular vehicles will be under the 5 years, which means we would be carrying full coverage, which will increase our insurance cost.
How
So-
much?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
We're kind of presenting it before we're doing a whole lot of work. We just want to,
That's,
hey, this is what's on the table, what do y'all think?
All right, so then the next question I had was, is that their proposal, and I understand it's just the initial hack, but 36 in 1 year, that seems, is that doable? Is that actually feasible
To get the vehicles or,
within a budget that you're given?
affordable.
Is that even
and then that,
feasible to execute, or is that number would
that all,
need to
de-
be changed?
that all depends on, all these numbers can be changed. He said we can mix and match and do it however we need to do it to fit us. And he can fit a budget. We can make a budget and have him stick to it, and they can rework the plan with that.
That's really what I was trying to
But
get at.
that also, our percentage down also can, give us more or less with that, with our budget. I mean, if we put less down, we can, bring in more vehicles, or we can put more down and bring in less vehicles, just to stick within our budget.
If you guys would look at the slides that they'd sent over, and I don't have these numbered, I apologize, but it says the 10-year budget forecast, current versus recommended, which states the 37 vehicles.
Yep.
They chose they're recommending 37 because that's our number of vehicles that are over the 10-year mark. And so they're trying to start the ball on that. But the way they explained it is if you go up and you look at the purchase price, and it's got for year 22, because of the way they're leasing those, it would still be within what we actually have budgeted if we were to go out and buy those outright. And I think that's where Dallas was trying to say is, we can work within all of that in order to get what we need, but the fact of leasing them instead of buying them outright is what makes it feasible to get that many
Okay.
So do you
at
have,
once.
so do you have any idea when they quote, it sounds like as part of their analysis here, they're including whatever the wholesale value of the vehicle would be at the end of a 3-year term or whatever that term is. Are they using current prices, or are they using some kind of blended average prices?
We'd have to check.
Okay,
The examples that they gave us were current prices.
yeah.
Yeah, but those are inflated, we know, so we
Yeah.
need to make sure that we're not.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when will we know if we qualify for the state procurement prices, and how much of a savings would that be?
We already do.
Okay.
And that's what they were saying, that they went, so the way, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in.
You're fine. We already qualify for the state procurement when we purchase the vehicles. Now, they don't use our state procurement, they use a government pricing. Which, he said it works out within a couple hundred more, a couple hundred less. It just depends on the market in the year and the type of vehicle, but they're fairly
So it's
close.
pretty similar.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that's what he said. Do you have the document that says that, or is that what he just said?
That's just what he said. We don't have, what you see is the only documentation we have so far.
Okay.
Okay.
So we don't have in writing the comparison?
Well, that goes back to what prices they use and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So one thing that would be nice, and I'm going to use a phrase you may or may not be familiar with, but it would be really good to see a model contract from Enterprise. You know, blank contract without numbers filled in. It would be really interesting to see what the terms and conditions are, whether there's any termination provisions, one side or the other, termination liability, all of that good stuff. All that boring several pages of fine print that can burn you. So it'd
We
be,
haven't
it'd be,
even got pricing from them yet of what the fees would be
Yeah.
in order to do this.
okay, yeah.
Like I said, the reason we brought this up and we're just getting into it is because of the economy we're in and the market we're in. In the next 18 months, it is going to be very, very difficult to get vehicles.
Yep.
Well,
And
That may
at
be
first,
longer than that.
yeah, at first glance, it appears to be very intriguing. It looks like it would result in, if the net savings that they're talking about is realistic, that's an if right now, but if it's realistic, it looks like it could save the village a not inconsiderable amount of money over the next few years. It could put our fleet in a much better position in terms of being roadworthy. It looks almost too good to be true, you know.
Hence the
But that,
management fee, we haven't got the price on yet.
well, that's exactly it. Well, and that's really the question is where's the bottom line on it? I mean, I think, I certainly think it's something that you ought to pursue, you know, but obviously you need to understand the cost impacts from that. You need to understand what your insurance impacts are. You need to understand what their management fee impacts are. You need to understand if there's any problematic terms and conditions. And I'm sure there'll be other interesting things that get discovered in follow-up conversations, because there usually are.
So at this point, you're just kind of asking this committee for a sanity check to see if it's worth pursuing?
Pretty much. But we're asking before we go down a rabbit hole, that then we get asked, why'd you go down it?
Well, and I'm kind of wondering, I think it's a great job and I think it's an interesting concept, but would it be wise? I always like to pit one bidder against another. Are there other companies that do this? Might it be wise to check with them or let Enterprise know we might be?
I don't know if there's any other companies, but yes, that is something we definitely need to vet out and see if there's any other companies that offer the same and definitely compare.
And I believe they did say that they are the largest.
Yes, I believe they did.
Reseller.
They do work with quite a few companies based in Arkansas and Oklahoma as well, so we're going to call them and see how it works with them and how that's going.
Good idea.
One of the other nice features that this offers, and you can speak to it, is some of the data that they collect and put at your fingertips as well. Every time it gets serviced, it's going into the database,
yes, yeah.
The miles, so that they're constantly keeping track of where a vehicle is at. So they may come in and say, hey, you know, we recommend you go ahead and do this. You're kind of reaching a tipping point and stuff like that. So they work a lot with you and give you a little bit more analytics to what you've got.
Will we have access to that data so that you can be monitoring that in case we ever had to change out? Would be a good question to know too, or is that proprietary data that they won't share with us?
No, it's all on an application that he would have access to.
Yeah.
And they
Well,
said
but when the
that,
application ends because you terminated with the company, did you
Yeah.
lose all that data?
No, their data, they did say, we have a computer maintenance system that
Yeah,
we
I
track
know.
all of our data from, and they said that theirs could pull over into ours. We still got to do some research on that and see if it actually does, but they did say it would, what's the?
Integrate.
Yeah, integrate with ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because
that was
especially-
my point.
Especially
if
if
you-
we're doing the in-house maintenance and stuff at the shop, they need to be able to put that into the system. And so we don't want to create double clerical work either. So,
Would this potentially have any impact on what we would need for staffing to maintain our fleet? I mean, I know this is a small percentage of an awful lot of the equipment we maintain.
But this would actually help take some work off of our shop, because most of it would be under factory warranty.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, my thought on it, listening to it, certainly an intriguing possibility. I mean, personally, I'd be willing to extend the offer if you can get a model contract from Enterprise with terms and conditions and all that. I'd certainly be willing to take a look at it. I'm sure some of the other folks here on the committee would be glad to take a look at it, looking for the interesting stuff. I mean, it sounds like probably your next step would be to go back to Enterprise and say, yes, we're interested, let's talk real numbers. You know, let's talk management fees. We probably need to understand what the implication would be on our automobile insurance, things of that nature, and try to run that benefit cost trade and see if, I'm sure it's not gonna be quite as good as it looks like right now, but still, if it's a net savings to the village and it takes a problem off of our plate, it's potentially attractive.
I'd also ask them for historical data, since we know that over the last few years, we've had some ambiguities in the system as far as purchasing of vehicles and cost of vehicles and stuff, so it'd be nice to know what this, I'm sure they have the data, so could they show us the data for non-COVID years, non-chip problem years, which we could then have a better sense of what this might look like in 18 to 24 months from now, when we're deep into the contract and now things have gone back, quote, to normal. We need to have a good understanding of that, because it may look great now, but it may turn out to be ugly later if we don't know what that looks like.
Well, the one thing that is on our side is we don't pay MSRP on vehicles.
Yeah.
We pay the state procurement, so that right there drastically reduces our cost in the beginning. So our wholesale value really is right in line with our cost.
If we had someone doing the same administrative work they're doing, what would be the advantage working with Enterprise as opposed to getting rid of all of our vehicles every 3 years and doing those kinds of things?
The main concern right now is
What-
finding the vehicles, getting the vehicles in, because right now we're on I believe it's 8 to 12 week lead time on vehicles right now, and they say it's supposed to get worse in the next couple of months.
Okay, so
I think it comes
The
down to,
power
I think it
of
comes down to
having-
buying power, Gary. You know, if
they're
you're-
selling their
we're
buying
buying,
power.
we're buying
Yes.
20 or 30 cars, and they're probably buying 10,000.
Yes.
You know, so you're gonna get priority in what's coming off the line, because you're ordering large quantities.
Okay.
And as far as resale as well, because they're going to all of the people that, or all the companies that they work with as far as the wholesale industry, that maybe we would be lucky enough to have somebody that has a foot in the door, but it would not compare to what they've got.
Gotcha.
But it
As far
comes
as
back to Larry's
resources.
question, if things normalize and the picture changes for us, what does it cost to get out?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why we need a copy of their model contract. See if there's a termination clause. I'm sure there's a termination clause in there, probably bi-directional. We need to understand what it is. We need to understand what the financial implications are from that. The other thing we'd probably need to be on the lookout for is what are our requirements relative to the contract. I'm sure we have some reporting requirements or some communication requirements, so we have to make sure we stay within so that we don't get hit for scope and schedule from them. So, but I do think Dallas, going out and calling up a couple of their current customers and finding out how the relationship's been working for them, especially not just ones that have come on in the last year or so, but if you can get one that's been in the deal for 4 or 5 years, probably a good idea to check with them too, because a lot of these relationships, there's a honeymoon phase, and then after 3 or 4 years, there's a divorce phase.
One thing that I'm not comfortable with is that they are kind of putting a rush on this, and they said themselves they don't like putting a rush on it, but they're wanting us to maybe come up with a decision in 30 days. I don't see that happening, and I asked them if we could, skip this round and come in next year, and they said, yeah, that's perfectly fine too. They're just going to have a lot harder time finding vehicles then.
Sure.
In that 30 days, is it are they committed to purchase a certain number of vehicles in the fall? Is that what's happening?
It's the end date for when the manufacturers
For the
are
order date.
putting out the 21, 22 models.
22 models.
And then they're
It's
not
the
even
order
making
date.
models for the next year for what our pricing allows us. Like, we can't go to Chevy with our procurement program. We can go through Ford, we can go through Ram, and a few others. And so the ones that we need, it's based upon the fact that they're shutting down production.
Yeah.
So they were saying, we can do this at any point in time, but we will have difficulty finding vehicles regardless. What their clause that he mentioned earlier was that they provide to the government, and they're making sure that we're applicable, is if we were to discuss this and go ahead and put some vehicles on order with them, and then for some reason we decided we did not want to go through with this contract, we would not be held liable for that order. They would be able to go ahead and distribute them somewhere else.
Okay. I mean, it's a good concept as long as the paperwork says that. It also could be they're coming up on the end of a fiscal quarter and they're trying to get a few more sales. That's never been known to happen.
Well, they did stress quite a bit that they were not trying to rush us. I think this was more of an internal decision that it needed to be done swiftly or quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they really do have a drop dead date, we just need to understand what it is and see see if it's within the realm of possibility. I mean, I don't see this and the board may have a different opinion about this. I mean, they've established a budget for vehicle replacement, as long as you don't break the budget. The mechanism for doing that vehicle replacement, okay, go do the right thing.
And when
But-
does their 30 days start counting? Is it from a week ago?
I think it's a rough date. I don't think it's exactly 30 days. That was just kind of a rough estimate he gave us. We first heard about that a week ago, I believe.
Well, in our meeting, I think he said it was December 3rd or something. He gave us a direct cutoff date, I believe, for when the manufacturer stuff. So that's when they were saying if we were able to put something in before that date.
Okay.
And so that's where okay, well, we have roughly 30 days or so.
So my only comment is their urgency isn't our emergency, so
Yes.
we need to do our due diligence, and if we get it done and it works out, great. If it doesn't, then we're at least confident in our decision. So, yeah, I think we work on it hard, but we need to have the answers to the questions.
Yeah.
Are there vehicles, just as a covering the bases, are there vehicles that you can't get that we absolutely have to have in the short term like that?
Well, I really don't know. We've got to approve the budget first and to see what has been approved, and then I'll have to see what is available and what we can still put in order for. And that's the big issue. Once our budget gets approved in the end of this month or November, something like that, we've only got 30 days to put in orders for the 2022 models. If we don't put those orders in, we're waiting to see if one shows up at the lot. Because there's nothing on the lots right now.
Well, explain to them where we're at with the police vehicles.
So we bid out 3 police vehicles back in August. They're still, he says they are gonna get a shipment anytime. He's been telling me that for 3 weeks now. He still hasn't seen them. And he said, you're gonna have to just put a bid in and let them make them for you. And that's 12 weeks out.
And I think that's one of the big differences with this program is they go directly to the manufacturer and place the order for the vehicles versus trying to go through a dealership.
Yeah.
And that's where their profit comes from, because they're cutting a middleman out,
Wholesale,
or a couple of distributors out, so, okay. Well, I would say definitely pursue it. I mean, 12/3 is certainly a sporty date. I agree with Jeff. We do our due diligence, and if we can get it done by 12/3 and make it work, that's wonderful. If not, we'll have information to inform us for when their window opens again. So,
Sounds great.
In the spirit of sanity checks, like Larry, you looked at the spreadsheet and the number at the bottom right-hand corner looked really attractive. Whether it's too good to be true or not is another issue. There seem to be two pretty important columns that I have no idea where the numbers came from. The first one is the equity leased column, the other one is net cash column. So you certainly don't have to answer this question today or tomorrow or next week or any other time. But in terms of analyzing the total deal, it would behoove me to say, how are those specific numbers calculated? Because to me, they come out of nowhere.
I believe what they pulled for the equity lease and the equity loan, that is all what the projected resale value would be.
correct.
And so that's where they put that in there. And then all the maintenance, the fuel and the fleet, all that added up and subtracted gets you that net cash.
Well, it got the fleet budget. I could not reconcile it to net cash at all. I could not find the differential. The second issue is, for me, this is what I call an open business model. Stuff is coming in and out all the time. It would be helpful to me if you took one vehicle that we bought, which is what we normally do, run it out 10 years and say, here's all the cash
I believe that was in
requirements.
the slideshow, wasn't
So
it?
they had two examples
Right,
of
okay.
vehicles of like we had just purchased.
Okay, that would be helpful. And then they would have a vehicle, instead of running out 10 years, they would have a vehicle turning over every 3 years. So it'd be 3 vehicles versus 1 vehicle, and cash, 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 cash. And then that would help me understand the economics of the transaction. And yeah, if they already have that, I don't know if I can get a copy of that and
Oh,
throw rocks at it.
did you guys get the entire?
No, we only got
Just 2-pager.
Okay,
Basically,
I apologize.
like,
I'll forward this out to you guys.
Okay,
But they've got a vehicle just like now, like what we would purchase with about what our price is. Now, it's not
Right.
exactly. And then they've got the years in service, and so it's got the sale price and how it changes. And then behind that, they do have 2 different examples of if we were to, what our costs are for years 1 through 2, and then if we were to keep it
Right.
longer, what our monthly cost would end up being. So
That'd be
I'll
helpful.
forward that out.
This
to
might
them.
make a lot more sense to y'all if once y'all get that. I thought we already sent that out to y'all.
Well, that's
No,
all right.
Sorry.
That's
so
okay.
you send it out to somebody, but yeah, I didn't. So great, thank you.
So I would say, what I'll do is I'm taking a note to self to say this is a tentative agenda item for our next meeting, 11/8. Rather than ask questions of you guys and have you pass them through to Enterprise and pass the answer back, if you guys get a week or so down the road with this, get a copy of the model contract, get a better understanding of the cost impact of insurance, cost impact of the management fee, all that sort of thing, and it still looks like it's a worthwhile opportunity to pursue, maybe we invite the Enterprise folks to come to this session on the 8th. And that way we don't have to have you guys carrying messages back and forth. We can ask questions directly of them.
We Zoomed with them for our meeting Thursday. Would that be fine
Absolutely.
with you guys?
Absolutely. That's perfect.
And that's what we'd asked if they wouldn't mind coming and doing it. It was just too much of a short turnaround. to
Oh, no,
fit
no,
in their schedule.
that, understood. It was appreciated that you tried to do that, but, certainly workable. We probably needed to have this conversation anyway. Okay.
All right,
Very
thank you.
good, sir. Does anybody have any closing comments for Dallas before we let him go?
I guess the only comment is, I think it's important that you're looking at all these kind of options. One, because of the market, and the market, even though they say 18 months, we all know that that might be longer than that, based on everything I've read. So I think it's good that you're exploring these kinds of things, and now it's just a matter of making sure we fully understand the
Yeah,
implications.
we're definitely going to vet them out and make sure it's the right decision.
Yep. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time, sir, and thank you for your efforts.
Good job.
Thanks, Dallas.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item, Carl, I'm gonna turn this one over to you, the emergency reserve, hopefully last and final write-up.
I guess the question is, the write-up I sent out last night, I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look through that. I think the only two changes on there from prior were talking about, I think it's in section 1, just referencing the old policy, and that this is replacing that policy, and then some clarification in the section 3, I believe.
You want to see it?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it right now.
2C.
You can blow it up if you want.
Section 3, about the operating emergency reserves, setting it at 2.5 million, and basically clarifying that it consists of both the investment account and the available line of credit. Other than that, no other changes, unless anyone has any more comments about it.
Two small changes.
Okay?
Under operating emergency reserves, it says exactly 2.5 million. I think the correct number, and you have to check it.
25044.
It's, yeah, 2.541 or something
Oh,
like that.
okay.
So it's a small change.
2.54,
Yeah, the
2,541.
investment is 1541,
Okay,
and
Yeah.
then 1 million on it.
so that's easy change.
And on the second page, at the end of the second paragraph, it says Public Utility Working Capital Fund. I think the documentation we're using, or nomenclature we're using nowadays is Public Utility Capital Fund, or funds.
Sorry, Tom,
Yeah, I
what-
think you dropped the word working.
Which paragraph, I'm sorry?
At the second paragraph on the second page, the last sentence.
Got a paragraph number on it, because I'm not finding that sentence on the bottom of the page.
It's second page. It says, as after January 1st, 2021, net earnings, if any, of the public utility department shall go to fund the utility emergency reserve or the public utility working capital fund as designated. It's the last paragraph right before section 4.
Yeah.
The last paragraph is section 3.
Okay.
The Public Utility Working Capital Fund, that's the,
Well, it's what we've been calling it, but I think
yeah.
in the documentation we see generally, it just says Public Utility Capital Fund. I mean, that's the words I'm seeing on the monthly report.
Okay, so let's ask, I mean, but does a working capital fund, I mean, we can, the other ones we can change, right?
What other ones? I mean, there's no documentation that essentially establishes the capital funds.
Correct.
It's-
So we can call them whatever you guys
We
see
can call them
fit.
whatever we want. I'm just referring to the current monthly report.
Yeah, that's a coming attraction for
So-
us. And I guess I don't really care what we call it. I
Yeah.
guess we just have to pick a term and be consistent.
What's it called on the balance sheet?
I believe we put it in there as utility capital fund,
Yeah.
and then general capital fund is the other.
Utility.
it'd
So just
be-
take out the word working.
And
Take
since
out-
we have
take out
to,
public
since we should be writing a
utility.
policy on that, as long as we then define what that means, then I think we're okay.
Because we just put in utilities.
And that is something that we do need to,
We need to get
just start working on here in
going
the
on.
near future, correct? So I think that's a utility capital fund instead of public.
Utility
Got the
capital
word
fund.
Working, and
Yeah, take out public, take out working.
Yeah, utility capital fund.
utility capital fund, yep.
Okay. Do you have anything else, Tom?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody else?
I motion we approve this to go to the board with those two changes.
Second.
Right?
Second?
Becca seconded it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So as soon as we get the red line, we'll send it to Katrina and have her route it to the board for their review and concurrence or feedback.
All right, for clarification, you mentioned red line, I just was gonna forward a clean copy to the group.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
That'll work.
I have a final comment on this topic. It's not a final comment. It seems what follows this is we need to create a policy for capital funds.
We do?
Yep.
We have to review and perhaps change the investment policy.
We need to circle back around to it.
We
Right.
probably need to cross-check that one more time, but
Right.
I know when we started down this road, we took a look at the investment policy, and there didn't appear to be any need to alter it. It appeared to be sufficiently broad to allow us to work within it.
Right.
Now, that said, it's not a bad idea to cross-check it before we finalize the next policy.
Well, then, this may be slightly out of order, but this whole issue started with the unprotected funds comment, which was then followed up by Gary's memo saying, please do this. So all of these things are all wrapped up into one big enchilada, which, it starts with Gary's request from the board. I shouldn't say Gary, it's the board's request. So it's, like I said, it's just one big enchilada. So that's what I have to say.
So your proposal is?
Well, my proposal is, in terms of looking at this as a project, this is just one of 4 steps, maybe 5, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, we have to respond to the board request. It's going to require us to address unprotected funds. It's going to require, unprotected funds is probably going to require us to address the investment policy. Kind of a hanging issue was last meeting, and Ford isn't here to comment. You had asked Ford to write up a comment that he had made, which
I did.
was actually a very good comment.
Yeah.
But that strikes directly at our investment policy.
Well, I don't know that it impacts the investment policy, but I think what Ford was basically articulating is what I'd call an accepted risk. Yes, it's an unprotected fund. Us and everybody else out there has that problem.
Well,
There's a rationale for why the fund's unprotected, doesn't affect any of our policies.
My personal opinion is our investment policy, if and when we loop back to it, has some loose ends that tie directly to Ford's comment.
Possible.
So, I mean, one way or the other, I feel that the result of, not a result, but tied into Ford's comment was the requirement that we go and review the investment policy. But, when I did look at it, I said, there are 2 or 3 what I felt important loose ends for us to address. I personally would change the investment policy, but that's up for the committee to discuss and decide. But all that is, different steps along the same path. All to resolve the request that Gary had submitted.
Yeah, I basically agree with you if I'm following you. The question was, review policies in the area of cash management, and that involves investment, audit and funds control, debt usage and management. Even if it doesn't need to be changed, it's part of cash management. And then the reserve funds we just finished.
But it all kicked
No,
off
that's
with
the way-
unprotected funds. So,
That's the way it was viewed when it was sent, and some of it, like I said, may not need a change,
correct.
but that's what we're going through.
So I take that as we need to work on the capital funds policy,
Correct,
and then we need to review the investment policy.
correct. Well, we also need to review the board request and respond to the board request.
Yes, within the context of those two policies.
The investment policy as it relates to cash management.
Right.
In other words, yeah.
It's not a separate task, it is the task, and the policy that's applicable to the question is the investment policy. I'm just trying to be clear that there's not multiple tasks here, there's really,
One big.
his task, and his task really is applicable to, we've already done the emergency reserve, we need to do the capital funds, and then investment policy. And if we look at all those and keep mindful of Gary's question about risk and on cash management, then I think after the review of the creation of the next one and the review of the current investment policy, we will have completed the
Yes.
task. Okay.
That's all. That's all.
Okay.
That's it? Yep.
Okay.
Good.
So, next item on the agenda was our opportunity to talk amongst ourselves about how did the budgeting process go? I sent a file out this morning. I don't know how many people had a chance to print it. Jeff sent some commentary, Carl sent some commentary, I added to their commentary, and it's a kaleidoscope of colors. If you saw the file this morning, I sent it out in PDF as well for folks who don't have Word.
Hey, Larry, can we take, I'm sorry, I'm a little slow right now.
Now go for it.
Can we go back to the previous discussion? There was a lot said, but what is our action? And maybe I missed it. 'Cause
Well, so that's a good question, because I wrote down 5 things that kind of we cycled through. One of them was to review the investment policy, which we've already done once, so the investment policy review is actually in here twice. The conversation related to cash management, which I don't think we particularly looked at the cash management policies.
Is there cash management policies beyond the investment policy? That's my question.
I'm not sure.
I don't think there is.
You
I'm
mentioned
not aware of
audit and
anything.
funds control. Is that an actual policy?
There's a few.
Gary mentioned that.
Which one?
Audit and funds control.
Pardon?
You mentioned audit and funds control as a cash management policy.
Well, when this was written, pretty broad, cash management. As you know, may involve a checkbook and pile of receipts, it may involve a, but here, when this was written, at first glance, it just, things that appeared obvious were the investment policy, and audit and funds control, that's Chapter 1, Article 6. And no analysis has been done, that's just part of the question. And the other was Chapter 1, Article 8, debt usage and management. And that can even, debt usage and management obviously could include discussions like we just had, lease versus purchase. Just in a broad sense. I'm not pointing to that. Chapter 1, Article 10, reserved funds. And that has been rewritten.
Rewritten, so that one's
Yeah.
done.
Right. Now, again, those were just that first blush obvious questions to answer when discussing cash management. If your reading of the policy manual, a guide, that points to something else you think should be involved, then that's part of the overall discussion. Is this too broad?
Yes.
It is a bit broad. It's an open-ended question.
It is. Well, cash management is such a big,
Yeah.
but what brought that about was the statement in the audit. And, you know, the board of directors quite often get pointed on big problems, small problems, and sometimes overlook certain things. And this was just brought to the that statement in the audit was brought to the attention of the board. So that led to, let's talk about it. Now, if it's,
Fair enough. I think Ford, though, did a pretty good job at our 2 meetings ago explaining that that's in pretty much any audit report where you have over the FIDC
Yeah.
allowed amount of money in any account, it is unprotected.
Which is also what the bank said
Huh?
when they came to meet with us as well.
What's that?
The bankers made the same statement when they came to meet with us as
Right.
well.
So,
And the
I
auditors
thought
have
his
to say that.
insight was pretty good in the fact that we're not the only ones sitting in this, and that's
Right.
an obligatory requirement by the audit agency to point that out. And so I think looking at our investment policy to ensure that we know that that risk is there and that it's acceptable to property owners, then that's why I think invest, but we could take a look at these other 2 articles just to see if there's something tied to it.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
isn't there, and this may be unrelated, but I know Ameritrade with the financial brokerage account with them has an account, because we've kept a lot of cash waiting for the market to go down. Obviously, that hasn't worked. But they have a program where if you have $1 million, they will invest it in 250,000 increments in different banks, all under our name. And as I understand it, they have kind of accounts, we can have access to it, and it's the same thing as a money market fund. And it seems like someone else could do that, or
You
if
could.
not Regions, America.
There are options like that out there, but please keep in mind, if I've got money in 50, 60 different accounts that I have to pull from in order to cut my weekly checks
Right.
for paying our utility bills,
but you
the
wouldn't-
work, it does not outweigh.
But you would not do this. I mean, they are all Paul and Kathy Mollers at Ameritrade. We want it, we get it in 2 or 3 days from Ameritrade. It's one, I want to draw $750,000. It's there in 3 days. Actually 2, but I'm slow. And it seems like something like that would be available. Either I don't understand it, but I can ask my financial guy if he does. We've got 3.5 million in accounts like that, do we not? It's,
Got quite a bit sitting in there, but we also use a lot on a
on a
regular
weekly
basis.
basis, yes.
Well,
So,
I think the bottom line on that one, Kathy, is, pardon the phrase, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are you gonna get enough of a return to cover the costs that you're gonna be charged by somebody to provide that service to you and give you a decent rate of return? I mean, these days, anything related to banks, CDs, most of that very conservative class of securities, quite frankly, pays next to nothing.
When
And
you
so
add in
the
administrative
opportunity
fees,
to,
it is basically nothing.
well, that's exactly my point, is by the time you pay the administrative fees, you're probably better off to go through your couch and look for loose change.
Well, except with this, at least, I know, we pay our financial guy a fee, whatever arrangements he has with them. There is no additional fee to us. I think they're large enough that they have tens of millions at these various banks. They have a computer program that takes care of the titling of it to keep it at under 250 for each. I can kind of look into it, but I think those things are available. Maybe not, but,
They
They
are.
are out there.
Yeah.
They've looked into it a little bit.
the
They're out there.
return is
I
0.5%.
think it comes down to the risk versus benefit analysis, and like Ford said, every large company deals with this, and it comes down to making sure you guys are on top of regions and how are they performing, and whether that's an acceptable risk or not.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the entire concepts underlying converting reserve funds into emergency reserve funds is it lowers the probability that the POA is going to be calling on those funds to some degree, which lets the investment advisors we're using invest these things for a little longer term, actually give us an opportunity to get a little better rate of return on some of these investments.
But we really haven't gone down that road yet,
Yeah.
right? Because right now, it's all just sitting in the Cetera account,
Yeah,
Correct.
not invested any other way,
yeah,
which we haven't really finalized that whole discussion. Which goes to Kathy's point, maybe there are other vehicles out there for that, at least that part of money. Now, when it comes to Karina's day-to-day monies, we'd have to understand whether or not, like you said, is it really feasible to have, in essence, a checking account that is divested in multiple different pots of money, so you stay under the $250,000
Yeah.
deal, but yet still be able to operate
yeah.
and
Yeah,
write
when
checks
you're,
every day.
yeah, when you're burning $3 million plus a month, which is about where our budget is right now, it seems like that gets to be pretty tedious pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jonathan with Prime Capital is still willing to come and talk to us all. I did approach him about what some of our options would be as far as investing. And he would be happy to come and do that. It's just with everything else on our plate, I haven't scheduled
Sure.
that discussion yet.
Yeah, with all the budget activity we had near term, that kind of got pushed aside.
But he did mention that there could even be, the next day turnaround type of investments and stuff. They have a whole array of different options that we could look at.
Okay.
So that's another potential agenda topic at a future meeting.
All right, you're going down your list of 5 before we interrupt you.
Yeah, well, actually, it's now 6, because I
Okay.
forgot one. So, step 1 was first pass on the investment policy, which we've already done. Second pass was the cash management conversation. Gary's references to Article 6, Article 8, probably do need to look at those. Reserve funds, Article 10, hopefully we just put a fork in that here a few minutes ago. Item 4 is actually developing a capital funds policy. I would expect that to be a new article. Number 5 would basically be the re-review of the investment policy, make sure in light of changes made, we didn't have to go back and edit something there. And then item 6 was the explanation for unprotected funds, basically why is that sentence in the audit report, which is kind of what got us into this whole mess in the first place. So, and I've got a note to self to reach back out to Ford and ask him to give me that little couple sentence summary that he so eloquently said a couple of meetings ago, and I didn't have a chance to write down. So that's what I wrote down. So what did I miss?
Yeah.
So our action is to go find these policies and look through them and.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it's definitely we need to review the Article 6, Article 8 policies. Probably need to see if there's anything else out there that jumps out, just a cursory review that jumps out at us as someone might need to look at. We probably need to spend a few brain cycles thinking about what a capital funds policy would look like. I would guess it would look an awful lot like our emergency reserves policy. Probably with appropriate adjustments here and there for the specifics. Because unlike those documents or those policies which are intended to kind of sequester that money, this is really intended to be money that we build up and consume.
Yeah. So there'd be probably some words in there about how it's used.
Yeah. Yeah, more likely how it's funded, how it's consumed, things like that. Okay. So, last item on the agenda for today, budget policy feedback. Like I said, I apologize, it's a nice kaleidoscope of colors. I guess I'd like to start up top, you know, I mean, I saw Jeff's comment about, you know, Tom initiated the comment, what's called a big question, you know. Did we make a difference? Did we have an impact? I saw Jeff's comment. I'm inclined to agree with Jeff's comment, but that said, I'd like to understand from Karina's standpoint and from Gary's standpoint, representing the board and the staff, you know, how did we do? You know, did we make your lives miserable? Did we provide assistance? Did we land somewhere in between?
Well, since you're looking at me, I guess I'll go first. I did start to write something down, but I didn't bring it with me, so I apologize.
That's okay.
I do want to stop and take a moment to say thank you guys. I know that you guys have dedicated countless hours and volunteered your time to go through and do all the work that you guys are doing. Obviously, it's something that's near and dear to your heart, so I appreciate that. I do think that this budget process was smoother than the prior year. As far as kind of how I know we got off to a rocky start. I know that. And I think there's some refining that can be done across the board to make it smoother going forward. But I want you guys to know that I do appreciate all the input and all the questions and the different perspectives that you guys provide. That for me is critical, especially as you guys have a different variety of backgrounds. You know, between some engineers and marketing and all the other different areas, and I don't have that expertise. So you guys being able to come forward and say, hey, this just doesn't make sense, or explain this to me a little bit more, and looking at things from a different perspective, I really do appreciate all of that. Especially when I'm staring at 30,000 lines of numbers, sometimes you can blur it up real easy. So the fact that you guys are able to say, wait a minute, hey, I think there's a mistake or whatever, or I don't agree with this, I do want you guys to know I appreciate all of that. And hopefully with some modifications and knowing that the 7-year O&M and the budget being tied together the way they are now going forward, hopefully we can make some of these processes smoother. As far as streamlining and using the same format for our reports and so forth. So that's what I got. Thanks.
Okay.
And thank you for all the work you did into it.
Yeah.
Is there not software that will provide, rather than trying to draw over everything into Excel and, to me, doing the process twice, isn't there software coming in that will help? And how will that transition go?
Our current software does have the budgeting applications, and it allows you to make the modifications right within the software, or you can download it to Excel and work with it there. The problem that I've had anyways, and I'm sure there's a workaround and I just haven't come up with the best solution, is the options that it gives us within the tool itself is you can either create a budget exactly like you had, you can increase it by or decrease it by a percentage, or you can start with 0. Well, we're not manufacturing toilet paper, so I can't just say everything goes up by 5.8% or 3% or whatever the case is.
Right.
I also don't want to just use last year's budget.
Right.
So we have to start with 0. And with everybody having to put their input in and they don't have access to this software, and we don't want them to have access to the accounting software,
Yes.
this is the tool that we've had to utilize. I think there's some ways that we can make it easier, and I'm sure that there's software out there. They did have it in the budget 2 years ago to try to find some budgeting and forecasting. They also had it in the budget to get the paperless AP software up and running. That was at the time that almost all capital was cut off.
Right.
And to be honest, it was more important for us to find a paperless AP system at the time, so that we didn't lose staff from pulling their hair out and have a better tracking system and approvals on the front end and all that. So we went with that option versus finding some software yet. So yes, long run, I'm sure there's something that's gonna make it easier. I
But
just,
it's not here yet,
just don't
or
have
in the
it.
foreseeable future. Okay.
And that was my only comment I made about the budgeting software. There's a bunch out there.
Yeah.
And they will make your lives easier.
Yeah. Well, and it's been a learning curve for me. It's been a learning curve for the rest of the staff, and it's been a learning curve for the committee. I mean, there's not a single position that hasn't changed. Or, you know, it's got new people and you try to explain what's going on and rework through things. They're used to the budget process changing every year on them. So I did try to keep it as close as I could to how I had done it last year. But there's definitely a lot of room to make everybody's life easier. And I would love if y'all just point me in the right direction.
It's not necessarily applicable here, but I happen to be a little biased towards Excel because I can go into Excel and answer some of my questions without having to come back to somebody and say, how did you get there? You know, depending on how it's used, what it's used for, I have found it very beneficial to be able to get my questions answered just by
Yeah.
getting into Excel instead of having to go back and say, hey, how did you get there?
Well, and that's one of the things, like I said, having access for all of our departments to be building their budgets and get it into one consolidated place. That's the only place that I'm able to do that at this point, unless they write it all on paper or send it to me and I do it myself, but it's still gonna end up a manual entry in somehow. I did refine the process. While it's the same format that it's been when I took this position, I've not had time to make changes to formats and all that necessarily. But I did do a lot of the formulas so that I could at least reduce the manual errors as much as possible. So, you know, with all my VLOOKUPs and lens this and all of that, that way it's only entered once and try to carry it throughout all of my working papers. So trying to work as smart as I could with what I had. But yeah, a lot of times, like you said, you can go in and see what's going on without having to go to somebody else, depending on what it is, but.
Yeah, I can certainly understand the desire not to necessarily let everybody have access to your live accounting system. That usually results in
Yeah.
accidental errors that could take a long, long time to unplug. You know, it looked like things were pretty consistent from last year's budget to this year's budget. You know, I think one of our challenges is catching up. One of our challenges as a committee is catching up to how business is done. You know, so I think we have to be a little bit careful that we recognize that we're a support organization for the POA and not a leadership organization for the POA. You know, at the end of the day, if you've got a system that you can understand and you can explain it to the board and explain it to the GM, you know, then it's up to us to make sure that we understand how that works.
I think you did a fantastic job, and this committee, I think, did a very remarkable job working through it. There was a ton of information that's generated, and hats off to you for what you did to help us.
Thank you. I mean, y'all put in a lot of effort too. And like I said, I do believe it went smoother than the prior year. I do think, from my perspective, it's important to know where the big areas are that we need to pay attention to and not, you know, let ourselves get lost in all the weeds of here's 10 cents here and 20 cents there and so forth. And I think you guys really did a good job of that, especially, you know, allowing me to kind of wrap it up and then work our way down into the stuff. And I know that was a part of an issue on my part because the calendar and how things kind of went out. So I apologize, but I think you guys did a good job of trying to work with us and make sure you understood what the important parts were.
Well, I don't think that was on you. I think that was on us. One of my observations is we did not help you because we were late. You know, we should have engaged on some of this stuff, and it was lack of experience, lack of understanding of the budgeting calendar on our part. But we were late, and so we ended up having kind of a mad scramble to try to get some things done that should not have been a mad scramble. And that's probably the biggest opportunity that I see for us to be able to improve the process next year, is to make sure that we understand what the accounting calendar is and make sure that we're joining in the right point in time and not coming in 6-8 weeks late and making it harder instead of easier.
Well, I think it's important if we could work towards coming up with how we would like to review. I think the way we did it, for me, works. That doesn't mean it works for you guys, and I understand that, and maybe we can meet in the middle of what would work. The only thing I do want to ask, though, is I'm working with all the original stuff. Okay, so when I prepared the budget, I'm going off of how, for the most part, not exactly, but, you know, the same presentation format as what was there before. But yet then if we're modifying things, I guess what I'm trying to say is, please be cognizant of, we're working with one set of information and one style of reporting, and we're trying to make transitions and changes and stuff. So things kind of have to morph in order for those changes to work. Am I making any sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, I know there's a lot of room for improvement in a lot of areas with a lot of this. I'm using the word a lot. And I think as we work through these and we get on the same page as far as kind of the calendar, how we would like to see things, how we need to meet the deadlines to get there and so forth, it will help us to make it a better process going forward. I mean, the calendar I updated, and it was one that they'd used prior. So I just try to put in some more definitive dates instead of some roundabout stuff and clean it up some. But it was still an old document, and then we've morphed how we were doing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I know.
So,
Go ahead, Jeff.
so just a couple comments to all this discussion so far. So at some point, we need to talk about what's next. What does it look like next year? And to some degree, I think, to your comment, we were late and all that kind of stuff. Well, if we think about it now and put it on the calendar, maybe we won't be late next year. So that helps, I think, you and everybody in doing that. So to me, that's a big takeaway in the next month or so. We really need to take 2022 and put down all the dates that we're gonna do everything, or the windows of time we're gonna do those things, and cross-reference them to make sure that they make sense and that they're gonna get us to where we wanna be without rushing or and where we can put sufficient time and effort into them. So that's just from scheduling. We have that experience that we just went through. We wanna improve it. And therefore, the sooner we get the calendar out and mark it up, the better off we're probably gonna be. The second point to your budget software, Excel comment, as far as that goes, I guess my only comment would be is that, Carl, to your point, there are good budget forecast software out there. Maybe it's a task next year for us to examine and see if there's a good product out there that we would want to pursue.
I would like that.
I'm not saying we get it, but I'm saying we do the research and figure that out, and don't lie it all on you. Maybe collectively we try and figure that out. But in the interim, Excel's working, so we can all work with Excel. But the one comment that you made about, do I use a zero or do I use a whatever, I don't think we're using a zero anymore. I think we're using the 7-year OMT. So for 2022, we already have it built as of right this second. And now we're talking about what are we gonna change to the 7-year OMT for 2023. So we don't start with a blank sheet anymore. We start with what's in there. And therefore, we all know it would seem that we would have less questions and have to get into the line by lines, because we'll already have gone through the line by lines, and we can focus on why are we changing that number? What's the rationale for that? Is it cost of living, or is it we're adding this new project in, or whatever? And we focus on the change and not on the, trying to put it together, is what I'm saying, because it's already put together. And that goes to the sooner we align the OMT to the actual budget, which I think should be the focus of the next 4 months, so that we don't have that same issue. Because what we had is an issue where we spent a lot of time looking at an OMT, and then we got to the budget and the two didn't align. There was a disconnect. And that took up a lot of time. We shouldn't do that to ourselves when we're spending the time and effort on a 7-year OMT. That it should be the same format, the same lines, the same everything, and then we're just focusing on the change. It also, I think, would cut down on staff time, your time, the staff's time, everybody, because we're not creating we're not sending out a new Excel to everybody, we're sending out the Excel, and we just happen to be looking at this tab, 2023, going forward. That would be my bridge strategy to, is there a better software that could make it even easier for us, but maybe that's a research project that we're gonna have to do some work on. That would just be my observation on the comments that were made about Excel versus budget or whatever.
Oh, can I explain a little bit of what I meant by that? So when you go into our accounting system and you're wanting to create a budget, you create, you title your format and all that stuff, but then you can either do it directly in GP or you export it. And that's where I was saying, it's gonna take all of my GL lines, and it's either gonna give me an amount based upon what was last year, based upon what I tell it to change by, or it's a 0. That's where I'm saying we're starting with 0, because I don't wanna start with any of the others. And I agree, our 7-year O&M table, now that we know, because they hadn't done that in the past, they need to completely coincide. But until.
So in essence, you're importing.
They will still be in two different files.
Two different data sets. Yeah.
Because what I have to import has to be very specific in how it is set up. Now, that doesn't mean I can't create another tab in there, but I'm still gonna have to filter data from the O&M table sheet even over to the other piece. Now, I do think, and going forward, knowing that we're making them combined, if we reformat the O&M table to be represented like the budget is, or vice versa, if you guys, we can discuss all that. But then what I would like to be able to see is, okay, here was your 7-year O&M, here's your budget, and it's just 2 columns next to each other. And then here's all your history, maybe like we already have in our budget piece. But all I was trying to say is when we start with the 0 balance, it's because my spreadsheet has 30,000 lines of zeros. And then I have to go to the O&M table and put it in. It won't, unless I link it.
Doesn't auto-load.
But then I have to format the O&M table to be able to link properly.
Which goes to my point, that is extra work on you, it's extra work on the staff, and I don't think any of us benefit from them being different. So we know we need to review the OMT and extend it a year. It's time to make that OMT match your budgeting software so that we don't have to translate.
Right.
That they look the same categories, same everything, and then we reduce the workload, and we take the time from now until, right after the new year to start that realignment, so we reduce the work on everybody. That would be my suggestion going forward, because it's about time, right? It's about your time, the staff's time, our time.
Yeah.
It's a worthy investment in time to not have to deal with that for the next foreseeable future, unless you change your accounting software.
Okay. Cool.
just to that point, you can't import, you can only export?
No, you can do both, but it's a,
It has to be aligned. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
key.
by every active GL account number.
Yep.
Month over month,
Data port.
and,
Sure.
and that's all I was saying, is it comes in as zero, they fill it in, whether they're getting it from the O&M table or making it up, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
I can link it, but I'm still gonna have two separate documents in the
I
end.
understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me turn to Gary for a minute if I can, from the board standpoint. Having seen what you've seen of the budget process, sitting here and conversations with the board.
Well, the personal observation is, the committee saves many hours of frustration for the board. Because what this committee went through with the staff has to be done. So, with your backgrounds and the questions you asked are direct or on point, and that saves the board a lot of time. Now, having said that, this year is, I think everybody can admit, a very unusual year. The board has adopted the fee schedule. So regardless of what happens to the question about changing the assessments, the staff has the fees in their hands, so they can prepare everybody for next year. But the budget itself was tabled, not tabled. The board postponed reviewing the budget till the next meeting.
But that was really there just because at the next meeting, you'll know the outcome of the vote. So you'll know whether the baseline budget or V2 of the budget is what you're going to approve for next year.
That, and there was a feeling by some, I believe, that they just hadn't spent enough time on it.
Sure.
Again, going back to this year being really unusual. But I hope we can continue with the committee reviewing the budget with staff. That is extremely important to me.
Can you
Beyond that, I don't have a lot of specific input.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'd be looking for, is what can this committee do? What would the board look for this committee to do to specifically shorten their review or understanding or timeline or anything else?
Come up with the one-page budget.
And the wishes were horses.
You can do that. The numbers just get really big.
Yeah,
Can I just, Tom,
it can be done.
I give you 3 lines.
Tom, can I just make a comment? Based on the board's fiduciary responsibilities, I don't think the terms shorten their review time or things like that are actually what we're looking to do. I think we're looking to ensure their understanding is where it needs to be in order for them to execute their responsibilities. So I guess I would just be careful of words like shorten and stuff like that.
Well,
I mean,
it's whatever we can do to help the board do their.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if the board had any specific feedback for us, I think we'd be looking for that, but if they don't, then.
I have heard none so far.
Okay.
We may get some over the next month or so. We may have to ask that question again maybe in December after you've had a chance to do the final budget review and approval, in fairness to the board.
Good point. I have the advantage of sitting through all of our meetings, the committee meetings, and hearing the questions. And so I have that advantage. The entire board does not. They see the result. And Larry, I think you've made a good point.
Okay. So I think that hit, at least from my viewpoint, that kind of hit the what Tom called the big question item, because I really wanted to understand the viewpoints from both parties. There was one comment earlier I wanted to tag on to. We certainly need to do what we can to streamline and tie the budget process to the 7-year O&M, but I also think there's a third leg to that stool. And that's what I'll call strategic planning, for lack of a better description. You know, there are, and this is a place where, at least I believe, that this committee might be able to be helpful to the Hot Springs Village enterprise, if you will. You know, the board setting goals in strategic direction. And to the board's credit, a couple meetings ago, you already started talking about 22 goals and objectives. So that's good. That was one of those things that really didn't get done in 21, or it got done late in 21, that looks like it's occurring on time in 22, which is good. The general manager and the staff have a budget and a set of priorities and an execution strategy, and they're pretty much busy with their day jobs trying to go fix streets or do whatever all else they have to do out here to keep this place running. There's a little bit of a hole there with strategic planning, you know, and there's, I would call it silos of strategic plans that exist in various departments in the POA. I think the public utilities folks have, the water and sewer folks have strategic plans in place. I think some of the other departments have strategic plans in place, but they all seem to be kind of departmentally focused, you know, and what would be advantageous for us would be to look for those cross connects and try to ensure how those cross connects function, you know, and try to maximize the benefits, because again, the folks that are out doing their job, you know, they know their shop, they know their people, they know their resources. They don't necessarily know what's going on in another department. That's a place where I think we might be able to lend some support to try to help understand that. And the other part of that is then the strategic plan and the budget process and the 7-year O&M then all get in sync. Because if we have a strategic plan that says we're going to do X, and the 7-year O&M puts it, and they put numbers in the 7-year O&M and they're dramatically out of alignment with what we can afford, well, that's not going to help us either, you know. So we need to work on creating that sort of three-pointed stool or three-legged stool to connect all of those pieces together. So.
I want to back up what you're saying from past experience, having been there. Each department, I give them great credit for coming up with their strategic plans. Mm-hmm. But typically, when you look at it, when you get a good strategic plan from a department, and another one, and another one, and another one, you need to have an overview. So you have the strategic plan for the corporation, for the association, for the company, whatever term you want to use. And that's very difficult because you then have to do some prioritizing, you have to do some timing, and for an organization, just to have it by department, it's a real chore. It's very negative for the entity as a whole, because I think that's what I see as one of the main things that this committee can offer as part of the planning function. And I think it's essential to pull those pieces together, kind of organize them, have some basis for saying, you know, this is what is possible in this time period. And it's a huge job. I know it's a tremendous job, but I do think it would be a great thing that could come out of this committee working with the rest of the organization.
Well, and Becky, you've been here before, so I would think that this is neither a quick nor an easy process. You know, I mean,
no, I've been through it. I know.
Kind of level set ourselves and level set the folks out there who listen to these meetings on YouTube. This is not something that's going to be a Dilbert design worldwide architecture 2 weeks.
This is
kind
hours
of a
and
task.
hours and hours of work.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get accomplished unless a goal is set. The goal is something that is more than just a goal out there, a dedicated task. And yeah, believe me, I know that we're talking about a major job, but I also believe to the bottom of my heart, and I have for years, how important it is, how necessary it is.
Yeah.
So my 2 cents.
No? I like it.
Oh, Larry, you know how I feel about this. I mean, I think that it's crucial for the organization going forward. And especially with where we are in the budget and where we are with need for money and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I think this is one of the things we need to ask the board through Gary or whatever to directly give us this task to go do, and then we'll have to embark on this task.
Yeah, we gotta have the board behind
Recognizing-
us, otherwise we're wasting our
Recognizing that
time.
it's gonna take time, okay, copy, but then at least we know we have the task, the staff knows that we're gonna do this, so now everybody gets on the same sheet of music and off we go. And then from there, then we can we can get with the staff and figure out, first probably have to take stock in what we have and what we don't have. Identify those areas that we're gonna go start working on, and then, you know, build a work plan from there. But, I think without it, to some degree, you know, it's too easy for the organization to take major shifts in direction, which, is not, we're not that flexible here. So,
I thank you for bringing that up, because I have been in the position where I served on a committee, and we put a lot of work into defining, long-range planning is what they called it. And the board just kind of didn't even pay any attention to it. So it really has to be a commitment from the board for it to do any good.
That's why I said that we really needed is to ask Gary to bring this up to the board and for the board to discuss it, and if they agree with us, to task us to do it, and then we get on the process of.
It's easier
Fleshing
to
it
begin with their being on board than for us to do the work and then have to convince them.
Right. I also think it sends a message to the property owners that we're serious about very carefully taking care of the money and taking care of Hot Springs Village.
Yep.
This may be a dumb and unrelated question, I specialize in those, but might it be declaration changes come about in 2027? Is there, for those who have business expertise, any possibility to adopt a strategic plan which could be developed between now and 2025 and included in the declaration vote in any way, shape, or form? Would there be a value to that? Would it be, because when you've got a board that transitions and you get people who may or may not have experience, is there a value to it? Just a question. Or a possibility.
I certainly think there's value to having a strategic plan because, you know, the reality of it is that people in chairs are going to change, both on this committee and on the board. So, and the classic old problem, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do, you know, so you got to at least have a cardinal heading that we should all be heading for. I think there might be aspects of that strategic plan that could factor into declaration changes. I mean, for example, the current assessment change that's out for vote right now is not the be-all, end-all, last, best, and final solution for all of the financial ills of the village. You know, it's a bridge that will get us back into a positive cash flow situation and keep us there for a while. But there needs to be an adjustment to the declaration at some point in time to be able to accelerate assessments at a rate above CPI. And people can argue what that number needs to look like, you know, but until something like that happens, we pretty much guarantee ourselves another FRAD-F-like exercise in some period of time down the road. I would guess right now that's probably in the 29 to 30 timeframe right now if the current assessment vote's successful. But that could be off a couple of years one way or the other depending on circumstances. But if we had a plan to figure out what we needed to do to the declarations associated with accomplishing a strategic objective for the village, that could certainly factor into that overall plan.
And I'm kind of thinking, again, I don't know the process or anything of that nature, and I'm not a strategic planner, but some things such as new amenities should not be considered for a subsidy of more than X. Just kind of as a policy, maybe that's not in declarations, but I think you get boards and they agree to something, and they've done a good job of writing the policy, somewhat restricting future boards, but there's gonna be a new board next year, and a new board the year after that. And some of them are gonna come in with a drum to bang that says, I want pickleball courts on the east side. And somebody else is gonna say, well, we can do that for this, and then we just need a subsidy of this for the next umpteen years. And I don't know what's possible to restrict that, but I'm kind of gonna bang my own drum and say, I'd sure like to if we could.
Well, my view of that is that at the declarations level, I'm not sure a strategic plan fits in a declaration.
Okay,
What typically you would rather see in a declaration are priorities and or goals that the organization will follow, and those don't really exist in our current declarations, so therefore there isn't that hammer over top of the organization. So to some degree, you could make an argument probably for some kind of goals and or priorities for the organization as a whole, which would then tie to your strategic plan on how do you achieve those goals and priorities,
Yeah.
typically, because declarations tend to not be overly prescriptive.
yeah. That's kind of what I was afraid of, but thank you for cutting to the heart of the
But
question.
But to that point, I mean, the point you just made, right, that everybody is worried about the policy being changed, okay, but
Yeah.
the priorities in that policy could be put into the declarations, and then you couldn't change it by a board, right?
You
So,
have
so
to-
that's what I'm getting
Which-
at,
yeah,
is
that
that
would
there are
be-
parts and pieces of it, okay, that would then drive the organization to say, well, then how are we gonna achieve that? Okay, well, here's the plan we're gonna use to achieve that, and then here's the budget that's gonna have to match that. So that would be something to think about. That's just my
Yeah.
view of how the,
It might be wise to keep something like that in mind for when declaration
Yeah.
possibilities are, okay.
Yeah, I
And
would,
Thank
like
you
you'd
for
have to
your time.
define the skeleton, because a strategic plan is a living document.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, it
And
changes
so
too much
maybe
to
you put in
be
some kind of a
in a
skeleton,
declaration.
like Larry mentioned.
yeah, but the declaration becomes one of the tools that you have at your disposal to try to keep the community on plan.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Good question.
Can you tell me what it was?
There were several other observations that Tom put out there and some commentary from some of us. I would propose that we plan on winding down around 3 o'clock today. So we've had some long meetings in here the last few weeks, but let's try to see how far we can go through this, and then we can pick this up at the next meeting and close on it if we need to. The first set of comments were generally tied to fees. And there were a couple of I think, really good observations in here. First one would be helpful to get activity counts and revenues by what Tom described as sell, but essentially by what the fee category is. I think the real purpose for that, at least from my viewpoint, would be to make sure that there's sufficient demand for that particular category of fee to make it worth the pain for the POA to establish it and manage it and maintain it. You know, if we have a fee structure that only 50 people in a 16,000 person community are using, you have to wonder whether that's worth the pain, suffering, and aggravation. Yeah. I mean, I think the fee structure adjustments that were made this year were some really good adjustments, you know, being able to, and a relatively simple adjustment to say, here's the cost. If you're gonna set it up via payment program, it's gonna cost you 15% more. You know, I mean, that got pages and pages and pages of stuff out of the fee structure, you know, so then probably the next step is, you know, some of the parts of the organization that have pretty elaborate fee structures, you know, how many people are actually using it. And we may have to figure out what the threshold is If it drops below that, it's not worth the trouble anymore. Kind of tied to that was,
Along those lines, and probably, and you don't have to answer this question right now. I mean, ultimately, you are the person who's creating
Every-
this. How hard is it, or
every
are we
item-
crazy?
So every item that is on the fee schedule is an item that is entered into our point of sale. So typically, unless it's new, all we're doing is updating the pricing if it's applicable. We're able to go in and run reports based upon every item. I'd have to pull it all together, but yes, that information is there.
So it's not like terribly hard to produce. We may hate ourselves for having to look at it, but,
You will have thousands of pages, but,
okay,
well, I will have to look at thousands of pages to give you a roll-up number.
okay. So-
But yes, we track every item.
Right.
Each item that's on the fee schedule has an item in our point of sale, and we do, every time a transaction is done, you bought one, you bought two of each one of those things.
But
And we do,
ultimately, it behooves us to consider the words, be careful for what you ask for, you might get it. Yeah.
But it would give you a total, wouldn't it? If we took the existing fee schedule and just added columns that said, seems to me, I'd like to see the last couple years' data, both given COVID and given the packages, to see, okay, are annuals down because this many people took a package? But some comparative data, but would it be difficult to just take the fee schedule and add columns that 2019, we had 500 takers?
no, it's
We
just
had-
a matter of time for me to go into the system and say, okay, I want 2019 for this item, and here's your pricing. I want 2018 for this item.
Okay,
Here's-
there's nothing.
I mean, I can roll up all items, but I'll still have to break it out by, there's still, regardless, there will be work on my part, but I understand
So
the need
is it
for it,
your
and I don't
part,
have a
or is it the
problem.
department head parts?
I was gonna say that.
That's what I would contend, is
They-
it's not your job. Each department has their share of the fees,
Not
and they
each
should be able to tell us those numbers.
Not each department has access to the totally software to run that report.
okay.
So for example, public utilities, while they're earning fees off of different, home permits and all that stuff, and they have access to some of that. In order to what I'm talking about, I'm going into the point of sale to run the report. They do not have access to the point of sale to do it. So some things, yes, they could do. There are some things I probably need to do.
And it sounds like the point of sale system is not a relational database, so you can't go in and say, I want this and this or this.
I bet the software in
that.
there someplace has the ability to
Yeah.
customize a report.
Yeah.
If setting it up the first time is always hardest.
Well, and this is the software that we're looking at getting away from as well,
Yeah.
because it's got very limited capabilities. But yes, like I said, I can run all class ID, all items. Then I just need to go through and subcategory, pull out the totals for each and stuff like that.
Or give it to us and we can sort it.
Sir?
Or give it to us and we can sort it.
Yeah, that may be,
But I do want
that may
you,
be a good homework assignment for some of us who like to play in data like that.
I do want you guys to know though that they do look at their sales. They have to come up with, how many they project for revenue purposes and all of that. We just have never turned that information over to the committee. They have gotten rid of fees in the past. Like there was a 30-day, or maybe it was a 3-month, I don't remember, golf pass. They'd sold one, so we nicked that. We didn't bring it back. So we do look at that stuff, but I understand it would help you guys as well.
Can you do some sort of sample, like the last 30 days?
Yeah.
Show us the data, and then
Yeah, that may
we can
be,
decide if that would be useful, or if there's enough data in there to get what we need.
I'll have to
Understand?
manipulate it. When we run it, it's gonna give us who bought it, and it'll have all that personal information, so I'll need
yeah.
to clean it up in order to.
Yeah, the only thing you'd probably need is you definitely want to strip out all the personally identifiable information, but if you still had like POA number or something like that, so you could identify how many discrete people were utilizing it or something like that, that would be valuable. But, I mean, probably not a tomorrow problem or something like that, but it sure would be nice to be able to understand that usage going forward.
I'll work
I
on
think
getting that
sometimes we
information.
simplify this one too much, in my opinion. You know, we talk about, well, if only 3 people are doing it, why do we have that fee? That's important too. I'm not saying that that's not important, but I think actually the point that Kathy made is the more important point, okay? Which is if we have X number of annuals and then we come up with a new golf cart or whatever, and everybody is migrated away from that to the golf cart,
Yeah.
we need to know that. We, I'm talking about we, the staff, and we, the committee, need to know that because that is a change in the way the community's thinking. So if we're not taking that into account, how best are we able to advise the board that they're going down a good path or a bad path?
Yeah.
So to me, data-driven analysis is what we're really looking for, you
Yeah.
know? And there should be some data behind those numbers, and I know the staff looks at these things. That's the kind of stuff I think we ought to have a conversation with the staff about. Because that gives us better insight into where we're going, because demographics change, right? The community changes, et cetera, so that's what I would add to that.
No, that's fair, because we're changing behaviors, and the question is, are we changing
Is
behaviors
it good or bad?
in the way that we want to change the behaviors?
Well, and I'll also add, I thought it'd be, because the fee process for you is, I don't think should be on you. You should get it once it's pretty much finalized. I think it would be advantageous for the committee to meet with the committees that talk the fees, and maybe the staff person as well. And maybe somebody on the F&P could attend the committee meeting, but it seems like it'd be more advantageous to have them meet with the F&P as a whole way earlier in the process. I'm talking June.
Spring.
Yeah, even
Spring,
then,
early
just
summer.
to get some feedback about how they're thinking and why. I in particular was incredibly disappointed that we didn't have the variation for unimproved property and property owner rates in the fee structure from a marketing standpoint. But I think it would be advantageous to both committees to start that process earlier. And when you get fees, rather than saying, well, here's the one I did last week, I've got 50 million changes for next week, you get the end result, and all of that is taken out. And it seems to me that would be better from a process standpoint as well as from a production standpoint.
Get as much help as you can from the committee.
Yeah. And make fees that are not one person's thoughts of where things are.
Well, and I don't set the fees. There's a spreadsheet.
Yes.
Out there that has every division's tabs, and all I do is I go in and create a new column for the upcoming year, and I send it out and make them all fill it out, and then I present what they've filled out.
But kind of as it goes now is you do that, they send it, you put together the column or the process, you send it to them, they send it back to you, you make the changes, you present it to us. We make some changes, and then you do it again. And to me, this would be, come August, or June, or March, F&P is looking at, let's look at some possibilities and get some planning type things going. You get it in September once. You know, you can give them the raw form, and then they're gonna take the data from March through September and say, boom. I think it would be easier. In my mind, it is.
Well, you actually hit a lot. You actually rung most of the bells on Tom's other observations about fees, you know, and try to hit them in kind of sort of order. You know, goals for fees, you know, and as Tom put it, people should address if they've got issues as early as possible. You know, if you notice, to Jeff's earlier point, if you notice the implementation of a certain fee structure is driving people away from other things that garner revenue to the POA, that's probably something that should be identified early and a decision made about whether you want to continue that path or not. The next one that would fall out of that would be revenue goals. You know, there's a little bit in the 22 budget that kind of followed the FRAD-F recommendations, which were very non-specific, but basically said increase amenity revenues. Well, that was an achievable action. That was good, but it was relatively limited, you know, partly because of some of the extenuating circumstances in the community and partly because of time. But again, when you're having those dialogues with the committees and with the groups that are working on that fee structure, what are they trying to achieve? What do they need to do from a revenue standpoint? What are their, at a bare minimum, if your expenses are going up, make up a number. If your expenses are going up 5% a year to support a particular amenity, then you probably need to look at least holding on, to keep the subsidy at a current level, if not reduce it. Any kind of new fees, any kind of, I'm not sure about uniform guidance to fee setting. I like the concept, but the devil's in the details there. I think we have so many unique circumstances associated with fees and the various amenities that we offer. I'm not sure that there's much in the way of general guidance that's available, but maybe there's categories of guidance that are available. And if folks have those thoughts in mind, to your point, Kathy, March, April of the year, then they can be thinking about that as they're watching the year play out and understanding what the data is telling them. And when it comes time to make fee recommendations in August, September, then there's a lot less churn at the back end when things get compressed. And I'm not entirely sure that we didn't hit just about all of the fee points except, and this was I think this was a neat idea, once the revenue gets to where we need it to be. One of the things that you do tend to hear from people is the concept of nickel and diming the residents. It's $10 for this and $5 for this and $7 for that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, assuming we get a successful assessment vote, one of the things that we probably ought to look at once we get back to having a little bit more revenue available to us is trying to get rid of some of the, I'll call them nuisance fees for lack of a better description, but there are certain fees that are probably don't necessarily generate an enormous amount of money, but generate a certain amount of angst amongst the community, so some of those things might be targets for gradual removal over time, to be able to get back to more of the model when, from some time back when the developer subsidized a lot of this, where there weren't an awful lot of this, that, and the other kind of fees. You paid your fee, you paid your assessments, and you paid your major fees, and then everything else was embedded. So that's probably a good idea to look at, though that's probably somewhere in the 23, 24 timeframe before you can realistically start looking at that.
Well, we've already had some discussions regarding some of the fees that maybe we would like to be able to eliminate. They are more of the amenity fees, so if the vote were to pass, so those things are on the table, and I'm sure that, as you're mentioning, going forward, there may be other things yet. But there's already 4 or 5 that we've been discussing of, if the vote passes, we could take those off, and it would be more of a perk to the property owners.
I've thrown one of those on the table, which I think is a double fee. And so the fees obviously get looked at every year, and so that comes into this particular one.
Yeah. And Kathy also pointed out another good point there. There was a lot of discussion in the Frat F window about, here we are talking about simplifying fees, and I'm about to create another fee class. But potentially being different fees for improved versus unimproved property owners for at least some of the amenities. That's one of those concepts that at least in theory sounds good. Whether it's viable in reality or not, I'm not sure. But it's one of those items that potentially might be worth exploring when you start looking at the 23 budget process to see if you were going to implement something like that, what would it look like? What kind of revenue would it generate? Just to be able to have that data and make a data-driven decision on it versus a opinion-driven decision on it.
And that one, Kathy, falls into the same category I'm talking about, charging double charging somebody or not charging somebody that should be charged. And we would have to have our own little separate conversation on this because we have to have our own conversation.
Okay.
I'll go on record as saying, I don't think any of the fees should be reversed. I looked at, what used to charge to go to Chelsea back when it was then, I don't know, but it was $10 or $15 to be able to access online tea times. It brought in $80,000 in revenue, but dropping it, we're still spending the money for software. And I don't think anybody really objected to the thing. It didn't make us reduce the number of people in tea times or anything else. The vehicle stickers. I can't believe, some people say it's nickel and diming them to death, but good grief, look at what the gates cost us. We need every form of revenue. We have some additional cash, but it ain't enough. So, anyway, my thought, we'll have conversations.
Because I'm talking about double charging somebody.
Yeah, I'm interested in
You mean
where
the-
that is.
Do you mean the
Curiosity is
after
gonna kill
hours
me.
fee? Is that what you're referring?
No.
You get her from that side after the meeting, I'll get her from this side. We won't let her out until we find out.
Okay. So I've got pretty much 3 o'clock straight up. So I'm going to move that we kind of wind the meeting down at this point. There was some discussion. I did want to have just one quick ask related to the budget process. I know there was a 22 budget calendar. There's probably going to be a 23 budget calendar developed shortly. Do we know about when that budget calendar will be put into place?
Well, since
I think that just answered that question.
I tell you what, I will forward you guys the one that we had for 2022, and maybe we can come up with what we think would be a good blend of all of our needs, and we can develop the next year together.
Perfect. That sounds great.
I mean, obviously, some of it will be in-house and won't involve you guys, but I think the back end of it would be important to get us on the same page.
Well, and I think even understanding what the back end dates are there is helpful to us, because otherwise we have a tendency to look at the date and go, well, why is that there? Well, and then you get the backstory on it. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, okay. So I had a few items. I'm gonna put a tentative agenda item on the November 8 meeting for a go back on the enterprise fleet management conversation. And just let me know maybe a few days before I send out that agenda, whether or not that should stay on the calendar or not.
Absolutely, I will. And they are still willing to meet with us. I don't know if maybe you guys would like to get a little bit more information before you go through the demonstration that we went through. Or if you'd like to get that and maybe already have some questions you have in mind. I'm just asking if you guys want me to set that up, let me know.
I think from my standpoint, the thing that would be really good to understand would be the answer to a couple of the questions that we talked about, like what's their management fee going to be for this? What's our insurance impact? The other one would be understanding what their model contract looks like. At least getting it far enough in advance that we can look through it and see if there's terms and conditions in there that make us queasy. Once we get that data, I think it would be a great opportunity. What I'm hoping is maybe they can come to the next meeting and we'll have had that data with enough advance notice to be able to go through it and be able to make it a useful exercise for everybody.
So if it's all plausible, the meeting after the 8th or on the 8th to schedule the Zoom, that's what
I think we were looking for the 8th, so, if it's possible.
if we're able to get you everything prior to that,
Right.
the 8th for a Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
And you were gonna send out their previous.
Yeah, I'll send you the whole PowerPoint.
Yep. And then, I've got a note to self to go remind Ford for that write-up on the unprotected funds. He did such a good job of articulating that. I'm not gonna try to recreate it. I've got a note, but it's future item about, we probably do need to have a conversation about investment options. Though I'm not sure that's a November 8 topic, but maybe that's a topic a little bit later in the year. see where that falls. You've got the action to send us a 22 budget calendar, that pretty much takes care of that item. And then the other action I'll give myself is I'm basically gonna write up a proposal to pass, I'll pass out to everybody here. The idea would be the tasking direction to finance and planning relative to strategic plan development. I figured the easiest thing to do is to draft the action item, make sure we understand what the scope of work is and all of that, and then Gary will pass it to you and let you pass it up to the board and see whether they concur with what we're thinking. And those were the actions that I had. Did I miss anything?
Did you want us to review the various policies having to do with cash management?
That's a good point.
And I think we just need a list of which specific
Yeah, so let's
policies
see,
those are. I
so,
mean, we did mention them.
so the two that were written down were Chapter 1, Article 6, and Article 8.
And the investment policy.
Sir?
And the investment policy, which is chapter,
Yeah,
It might be 10 or something.
whatever that is, yeah. Yeah,
Well, that's in chapter 9. That's one of the ones that got
Yeah.
way to the end.
okay, so, yeah, why don't we take the action to review those, and then I'll put those on the agenda for 8th of November. See if we can't get cleared of those, and then we can turn our attention to the capital policy afterward. What else did I miss?
I've got one thing, at least for discussion, if not for us to look at, but, so the board approved the investment policy, and in the investment policy, there is a requirement for priority items to be tracked and monthly reporting and a forecast looking forward. I would think that working with Karina, we need to come up with what does that look like. And we got 2 months to figure it out. Because not only do we need to know what it's gonna look like, but the staff needs to know what it's gonna look like so they can put it together so that Karina can report on it in January, first part of February.
That's a good point.
So versus crisis management on that, I think the sooner we say this is what the monthly report, I mean, she has a monthly report. The question is, what's the addition look like? What is it, and work to set the expectations on what that's gonna look like, to track in essence, the metrics for those particular items for the community. And to me, the policy's in place, so it doesn't matter whether the assessment vote passes or doesn't pass, we still need to start tracking it.
Correct.
And, you know, the sooner we put out a draft out there, or come up with what does that look like, and to some degree, the staff has got some work here to do to come up with the metric,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, because I think I think at least several folks in the staff probably have an idea of what they want to put in that package. I think the challenge here will be adjudicating what's available versus something that's actually telling us information. You know, because we've all sat through many a presentation where there's pages and pages and pages of metrics that don't tell us a doggone thing.
Right.
You know? So let's try to take the list of possible items and neck it down to something that actually is a useful representation of where things are.
Correct.
So mechanically, I'm thinking out loud, but if this doesn't track, let me know. Mechanically, I'm thinking maybe we ask the staff to tell us what they think those metrics and measures ought to look like, and ask for that near term, and then give us an opportunity to take a look at that data and see if it resonates with us as, you know, something that's actually a useful metric, or if it needs to be modified or if it can be adjusted. Yeah, I figure we can either start and throw it over the wall to them, or they can tell us what they've got, and we can take what they've got and adapt. I'm thinking we may be better off to take what they've got and adapt, because we're just not sure what they're capable of producing with the tools they have.
Not only that, Larry, you get more of their buy-in initially.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it need to be more than budgeted actual?
Well,
Yes.
a little bit, because you've got, the idea was it was budget, it was how much was budgeted, how much was spent, what was done, and what's gonna be planned next. But the other part of it is, and I'll go back to some of our budget conversations. One of the data points, and I think it was on street improvement, was something like 33,000 yards of asphalt or something like that. Okay, that's a nice number. What does that mean in English? How many feet or furlongs of streets is that? What does that translate to in a measurement that somebody out there who picks up this monthly report and opens it up and reads it can actually tell them something useful? So just because you have the ability to generate a number doesn't necessarily mean the number is particularly helpful to answering the questions you have about it.
And that would include something like, this is again just projecting, but something like, if it's supposed to be this many miles at this cost per mile, well, we did this, found out the sub-base had to be
Yeah.
redone and everything, so it cost us 3 times more per mile, but it's still,
Yeah.
it would be important for the community to know that, I think.
Exactly. Things like streets, things like culverts, you're planning, you're gonna spend so much money on a contractor, and the target is you're gonna sleeve a certain number of culverts, and well, okay, so you sleeve 2 and everything was great, and then you had one that collapsed, so you had to go it differently and the cost went up. I mean, those are the kind of pieces of data that would be helpful for everybody, I think, to understand what's going on.
It gets at, defining what deferred maintenance means, right? So if you know that you're planning to do X and you were only able to do Y, there's a differential there, and it was either to the good or to the bad. And as a community, we know whether we're making progress, not making progress. Those kinds of things are important for the community, because the community today has no idea. And the board has no idea. We spent X amount of money. What did we get for it? And that is not talked about today, and we need to start talking about what do we get for the money that we expended?
And I think
I'd
that's-
like to see that chart. And then present it to staff and say, doable? Or
Well,
not?
I think it can go both ways. I think we can, there's certainly, I certainly have, and I imagine most of the rest of the people sitting around the table have a mental model in their head of some of the things that would be good to see associated with some of those various items. We probably have that list, and then the staff will bring us the data that they have, and that's where the negotiation starts at that point, trying to understand how that gets depicted.
And I think it may be important to present it to staff in a manner that, something you said at prior meetings, that shout your praise or something like that, or boost yourself. It's really a communication tool that we're working for. We think the staff
Beat your
does a
own
great
drum.
job, and this is just a way to communicate it.
Yeah, beat your own drum. If you're doing good stuff, take credit for it.
Yeah, exactly. And they need to know that this isn't a checkup and big, whatever it is, big somebody looking over them,
Big
big
brother.
brother looking over
Big
them.
brother.
This is an opportunity to
It's a brag sheet.
demonstrate.
Here's your
Yes,
brag sheet.
exactly. So, for what it's worth,
Yeah.
you can convey that to staff.
Cool. Anything else, Jeff? Anybody? If not, motion to adjourn?
So
So,
moved.
I'll
Second?
second.
All in favor?
That'll take long.
Aye. I believe
I've
we're adjourned.
forgotten, no, I need